All right, knocking out video number 2 of Endgames, basic Endgames, King and Rook Checkmate. And again, like we discussed with the first checkmate, make the box smaller, trap him on the edge of the board, give him a little bit of room, wiggle around in, and squish him. So, breaking it down, with the queen checkmate, it's much easier because the lady can kind of do all the work, cattle herding the king into a corner. With the king and rook checkmate, you must use the king and rook together. So, first things first, let's make the box smaller. Now, the king's attacking the rook. And this brings us to the rules of doing this checkmate. Now, the way I like to think about it is, when we can move the rook to make the box smaller, we want to move the rook. When we cannot move the rook to make the box smaller, we move the king. So in this case, if we were to move the rook in any direction, we're losing space. So I move the king to protect the rook. His king moves, and then we ask ourselves a question, can we make the box smaller? Audience? Yes! Rook c3, make the box smaller. King d5, can we make the box smaller? No, so we move the king. Can we make the box smaller? No, we move the king. We move the king. Made the box smaller. And we keep repeating this process of asking those questions. Oh yeah, like making the box smaller that way too. Boom. Until we get him to the corner. And once he is in the corner, we allow him 2 squares to go back and forth in. And then we do what we did in the last checkmate video. We get what's called the opposition to get our king in front of him. Please, please, please do not do this. We talked about stalemate in the last video, and I'm telling you again, this will ruin your day, just like Zoe's. So, King G6. Oh, yeah. I mean, she had 5 delays. No excuse. And, yeah, that's a good thing to point out. In all of these endgame videos, if you can't do it with less than a minute on your clock, you can't do it. In anything that you study in chess, if you can't do it in less than a minute, you can't do it. You don't have full mastery of it. That's including your openings or anything else that you're studying from our series. So, really good point by a student there. So, after King G6, King G8. And I've given this position as a tactical problem to students before. So, I'm going to go ahead and give this to one. I hid the notation real quick. Now, what's the best move?
Rook F6.
Rook F6, okay. That's actually wrong. Now I'm just playing. Rook F6 wins, but pretty much any rook move, Rook F6, any rook move along this file will force the king into the corner. So, Rook F6 gives him only one choice to get squished. So, very basic way to play this checkmate. And keep in mind, as a tournament tip, if you're only learning to do these checkmates from one angle, if you're in a tournament game and the king's on the opposite side of the board, stand up. You can look at it from an angle. Because I had a student once had the knight and bishop checkmate, which we're going to look at, and they were like, I only learned it from this way. They couldn't remember, but it was that way. He could have stood up. Keep that in mind, because that's a cool trick to learn. All right, that's it for the second one.